pretty quick.
Okay.
Okay, I want to talk, you said one more, but there's so many issues. Okay, I'll try.
We can do this again in a week. Why don't we?
Oh, okay. See, when I always tell people when they're students and they want to be a social worker, so then they turn around, this famous casual worker. So this person graduates from UNB or STU, gets in there, attitude saying, okay, going to fight for the poor. Then suddenly the boss calls her over and says, listen, you're a casual worker, and if you cause too much, your contract being renewed every 3 or 6 months, you cause too much problem, your contract will not be renewed. That happens a lot. So they're forced to agree with the boss. It's called survival. So how can you get these activists that really want to fight, and you can pay them that they know exactly where to go?
There's two ways. One is we could create an advocate's role within the system. That's some of what we were just talking about, with maybe finding a unique way for someone who's on the side of the applicant. The other thing I think we could do, you know, some people think this is nerdy of me. I'm real big on measuring government employees by how well they serve clients. You know, like teachers, I think a good way to measure. I don't think we should have
Facebook.
a lot of... Yeah, we don't have a lot of rules about how you teach. But we should reward you if more kids are learning to read. We shouldn't be telling you how to teach. Obviously, it's working. The sad part is right now we've got great people come into social work, and we only really measure two things. You're a good employee if you're on budget and follow the rules.
Exactly. And
maybe it's time to start instead having rewards if a certain percentage of your clients are getting work at the end of a year. You've done well. If your clients' kids are attending school, you've done well. In other words, figure out what you want for clients in poverty.
Then you get there.
And pay the social worker for doing that instead of saying you're a good employee if you follow the rules and don't waste our money.
Okay, now, I want to ask you, this morning I was in St. John, and I talked to a person that runs a soup kitchen on Sewell Street, and I'm going to put it on YouTube tonight. He told me he was glad that the rate went up, welfare rate from 300 to 534. Or whatever.
537, whatever.
But the rent also went up in St. John. So really the poor, they didn't really benefit from this hike.
They probably did in that one, just because, although he's not wrong. What happens is your rent is a percentage of your income. And so if your income goes up, you do wind up paying more rent. Before we do, because that one was so dramatic, that's not a big deal. Folks are a lot better off. But I've heard that, and people are right, before we increase any other rate, we're going to review that policy, and we may freeze that or grandfather folks for a year so that they actually get the full benefit of the hike. And because if say the 537 goes up $100 or 130, there every dollar counts. So we will look at that as part of it. And to be honest, there's one where it's good to hear from people on the front lines. I wouldn't have known that if people hadn't told me that, so we'll look at that.
Do you see a day that people like ministers like yourself and bureaucrats really, really listen to the less fortunate concerned, not just the same normal soapbox people like myself, just go on the street and really, really pay attention?
I hope we get there. I tried at the meeting place to...
That was good.
Well, you try not to talk like a politician, but to listen, and I think there's probably one thing that'll help. One is politicians have to do that. The other thing is people in poverty have to vote and not just figure out, well, all politicians are the same, so I don't get involved. Because people don't vote, then politicians don't respond well to it. And there are politicians who fight for more money for these programs, and there's some politicians who get up and say, well, my concern is tax cuts or that sort of thing. If you don't weed them out and separate them and support the ones who are trying to get more money for social programs, then they disappear. And new politicians learn, well, there's no point in doing that because there are no votes in it. So
people like Marvis Doucette, you know her, Mavis or Marvis, I was calling her that. And she was an outreach program, worked for the outreach program, and always went, looked for the poor and made the connection, and that's what we need. I think that's what we need.
We do, and I think everyone, not just, but I shouldn't just put the responsibility on those in poverty, anyone who cares about these issues. You know, when people come to the door, ask the questions and listen for the response, not just whether they say, oh, sure, I care about the poor. Do they describe it like do they talk about these issues like they've thought about it before they were asked? Do they sound like they know the issues? Do they, And, you know, when they get up with their speaking time, are these the things they're talking about, or do they pay lip service to it and talk about how to give corporations a bigger tax cut? And you got to sort that stuff out, and hopefully if we hold politicians accountable for how well they deal with these issues.
They got to vote.
They got to vote. You got to vote.
Got to vote. Listen, this is my last part, I guess. There's so many issues to talk about.
We should do this every once in a while, because you reach a lot of people who probably get information here that aren't going to read the Telegraph Journal. So.
Oh, okay.